Welcome to Working for Women, the Independent Women's Forum podcast, where we are changing the conversation about women and public policy for the better.
Hi, I'm Julie Gunlock, Director of the Culture of Alarmism Project at the Independent Women's Forum, and your host for today's Working for Women podcast. Today, I'm really excited to have a very good friend of mine, Yvette d'Entremont. She's otherwise known as the Sci Babe. That's sort of her celebrity name. She is the founder of the fabulous website, scibabe.com. Let me just stop there and say everyone should be bookmarking scibabe.com. It's a great site. She launched it in the fall of 2014. She had a lot of people kind of keeping an eye on her, but then she wrote a really pretty hilarious piece for Gawker. I think that's right, for Gawker, called The Food Babe Blogger is Full of Shit. It went viral. That is her title of her article. I am not just cussing on the very nice Working for Women podcast. That was actually the title of her piece. The piece went viral, and it really launched sort of Sci Babe into the stratosphere. And she now has a career managing that website and continuing her fight to debunk all the crazy bad information on the internet and a lot of the conspiracy theories and bad science that we see on a daily basis. She is right now writing a guide to bad science detection that will be out in the summer of 2008. We are absolutely thrilled to have you with us, Yvette. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It'll be out in 2018, just because I have not built a time machine yet. I'm working on it.
I'm sorry. What did I say?
You said 2008. I wish I could, man. If I could build that time machine, I'd be all over it. But
goodness.
I'm not an engineer.
Look at how good she is. Look at how good she is at tackling fake news.
I'm debunking already.
See? That's right. She is debunking.
I'm on it. But it's like I can't be everywhere all at once. And the fake news, there's been a saying for a while. The magnitude of work that it takes to debunk something is a magnitude higher of the amount of work that it takes to get fake news to stick in pop culture.
Well,
and if you remember, and this is one of those little, just for example, do you remember a while ago, one of the things that Food Babe put out there was that these are beers that you have to avoid because they're bad or they have GMOs in them. I still see that cited all over the place. I still get people emailing me about that. And people cite Food Babe as though she's a reputable source of information. And all I have to do now, because that article was so it was just such a 1-2 punch of just she's out. Is just I'll send someone that article and they're like, holy crap, really?
Yeah,
she's this full of crap. I'm like, yeah, she is. I didn't make up a single thing in that.
For the people tuning in who are not aware, and this is because the Working for Women podcast covers a lot of issues, from taxation to property rights to justice reform to healthcare. We're all over the map. So not every podcast has to do with food or debunking myths online. So I just want to give people kind of a sense. The Food Babe is a woman who became famous because she started to tell people that everything in their food was toxic, that things grown or sold in the grocery store were harmful to you and your children. She started sort of this bullying tactics of showing up with a microphone to a local Subway store and, harassing the poor local manager, for azodicarbonamide being in the bread, which is a preservative that's used in very minute amounts. And so you get it. I'm sure most of people. Yeah. Yeah.
Here's the thing. In order for people to buy into this, they have to ignore a lot of just facts. And we can get into the whole alternative facts thing, but she was living with her own little set of
That's right.
She popularized alternative facts before they were a thing. But you have to ignore the fact that we're living longer, and that our lives are longer and better and safer and healthier because of modern science and because of the good work of agricultural scientists and because of the type of things that we're doing with GMOs in modern agriculture. And she was just going out and being horrible to food companies and, I'm going to say it, to anything related to Monsanto and to scientists that ever touched a product from Monsanto because Monsanto. It's like basically if you had any association with them, you were bad.
Yeah,
and
well,
it was completely dishonest.
I want to talk a little bit. I want to get into that a little bit and talk about Monsanto, because you toured Monsanto, and we are about to do the same. Yes, you did. It was very public. You were all over Twitter. Yvette has a very large Twitter following, and so she's very transparent. So when she does these things, she puts it out publicly, and I really admire her for that. But I will, before I do that, I want to point out, and I think you're really good about talking about this too. Look, there's a cost to this. It's not just freaking people out, right? Because what the Food Babe says that she does is she improves people's food. But I think what isn't mentioned a lot of times is she just says, oh my God, they've used a chemical in a bread or in these crackers. But what she doesn't point out is the reason why. And look, pathogens, bacteria will get into your food, and it will mold them. It will put them off. It will make them bad. And this all costs money. If bread, for instance, I'm just using bread. If bread doesn't have a long shelf life, they have to toss more. What does that mean for the consumer? The price goes up. Yeah. So again,
the thing with azitocarbonamide is that it was a dough conditioner, and it made the bread a little, maintain that chewiness a bit longer.
That's right.
And it made it last a little bit longer. Now, I have the real gluten disorder, not the I live in Los Angeles and I'm a dick disorder. Sorry, Los Angeles, we're kind of fruity out here when it comes to our food. Please don't somebody ding me on using the word fruity. It's a joke. It's moving on. Not that I think anyone who's listening to this podcast is going to be a pearl clutcher. If you can stand me using the word shit, you can stand me using the word fruity. Moving on. But moving on. So people have been saying since I haven't tasted the bread because I can't because I have celiac, but I've seen so many people say that the bread is worse since they've taken out the dough conditioner. And there's a reason that they put it in there, is because it improves shelf life and it improves the texture of the dough. Now, they use it in such... Now, one of the things that Food Babe said was that it was bad for the health of workers in the factory. Yeah, if they inhale it. You know what they're not doing? Inhaling it. They're not standing over the bags of the stuff and going, I'm going to breathe this in because it's good for my... That's not how that works.
That's not how that works. And also, I'm glad that you brought that up because it does. What her movement has led to is, for instance, taking the yellow out of mac and cheese. My kids literally will not eat it anymore because it looks weird to them. They like that sort of day glow yellow, and so that's kind of frustrating. I mean, it's not like a huge loss to our family, but it is kind of frustrating that
one of the fun things is that she wanted natural dyes put into it, and one of the dyes that they did replace it with was a dye that was derived from paprika. Well, here's one of the reasons why they use those artificial dyes is that they're quite inert. And they're generally not something that people are allergic to. Now, there is a chance that some people... Now, you can have an allergy to almost anything. Like, it's possible because an allergy is just a body's overreaction to something, or an immune system's overreaction to something. Now, the dyes are, they're just because they're natural doesn't mean you can't have an allergy to something. Pollen is natural. People have allergies to it. But they're derived from paprika, or one of the dyes is derived from paprika. I saw almost immediately somebody commenting on Kraft's page, this is one of the only things my kid will eat, and he's allergic to paprika. Thanks. I'm like,
exactly.
Oh my God, this is horrible. Like, and you still won't eat the stuff.
You truly have been. First of all, I really do want to mention again. It was in Gawker. It was called "The Food Babe is Full." The Food Babe blogger is full of shit. And honestly, all you have to do is Google that, and or half of that, and it will come up. Just Google Sci Babe. It's a really good read. And I want to be very clear here. When you say Gawker, and when you sort of rattle off that title, it makes it sound like it's a typical Gawker piece, which is just being mean and ad hominem kind of insults. It was not that.
Oh no!
I want to say
It was my first piece. It was my first professional piece of writing. Like I had been a blogger to that point.
Yeah, but it really was. But I want to say to the listeners, look, it is some hard, serious science that that goes into. It really is. Despite its name and frankly its location, it is a serious piece that really explains the science behind a lot of these claims. She doesn't just say, well, she's crazy and that's not how that works. She explains, this is why I think you are so important on this scene, is I find these issues very complicated. And as you know, when I try to debunk some of these sort of bad science issues, I too write in this sort of natural way where I try to explain these. But I want to be clear here, that is a chemist. She is a chemist, okay? And she understands science at a much deeper level.
Bachelor's in chemistry, master's in forensics, and I worked for quite a few years as an analytical chemist, including working as an explosives analyst for a Department of Homeland Security contractor. So yes, I've been there and I've done that.
And it's important. I think that one thing that I've always said, and I think that IWF always says, especially when we're talking about science issues, be very careful about your sources. Okay, the food babe has absolutely no training in this area, and this is the important thing. I don't either, and so you could also say, well, I shouldn't read your stuff. But I actually never present myself as an expert. I always link to the experts, and the food babe does not. I want to be very clear. That is an expert in this area, can really, really talk about the science behind these things. So she's a wonderful authority on this. She's a great, great authority, and I really encourage everyone to check out her stuff.
I appreciate you saying that. But here's the other thing: is I tell people. I love your writing too, and it's part of the reason why I post it on SciBabe fairly often. But the other thing is, I tell people I'm an expert on chemistry and on toxicology. Those are the two things that I've studied quite a bit. But I tell people, when I'm talking about other fields of science, when I'm talking about medicine, or if I'm talking about pharmacology or something, I will say, here are the opinions and here are the facts that have been studied by experts who are more knowledgeable than me. It's like I try to look for review papers that are, and review studies are studies that combine, all of the studies from a certain area. Like, look for people that are willing to say, I'm not the expert, but here are the opinions from a lot of experts. Like, it's not, I'm willing to defer to people who know even more than me. And it's partially because I'm good at translating from science to English. And that's really what you want to look for in a good science writer, somebody who's willing to break down the science into legible terms for people who aren't scientists. And that's, I think that's one of my strengths.
I think one of your strengths, and I think you kind of nailed it there, but I think one of the other strengths is in science writers is I look for a measure of modesty. You just mentioned, I am a subject matter expert in these narrow fields, but I am not a pharmacologist. I am not, and so, that's what the SciBabe does. That's what I do is I say, look, I didn't go to school for this, but this person did, and they are considered a leader in their field, and they've done this data, they've gathered all this data, they've done this meta-analysis. These are the important parts of how to sort of choose your sources wisely. But look, I want to switch gears here because this is, our podcasts are not too long, and I want to switch gears, and I do want to talk about your recent trip to Monsanto. Now, I know a lot of people think that this is like, whoa, you went into Monsanto and you escaped alive.
I went there and I escaped without them turning me into a GMO or I was so hoping. I was hoping I was going to get my superpowers, and it did not happen. There was no radiation spill. I can't sling webs yet. I'm still hoping.
I'm hoping. Well, when we go, I'm hoping they can genetically modify me so that I can eat all the calories I want and not gain a pound. We'll see. We'll see how that works out. We'll see how that works out.
If they could, if they could do that, they would, because God,
very popular.
We live in a country where, people would everyone who's like Monsanto's the devil. If they could do that, everyone would be like, sign me up.
It's funny that you. It's funny.
Everything.
It's funny that you mentioned that. I wrote a piece for the New York Post. The New York Post ran this piece that I wrote that I said, if the biotech industry and plant scientists would just stop trying to save the world and instead take the carbs out of pasta and wine, all those yoga-clad moms that are so offended by GMOs would suddenly back it like you wouldn't believe. They'd be eating that GMO. They'd be injecting it like crazy. But of course, they're simply trying to save, kids in Southeast Asia from blindness. I mean, how boring is that, right? I mean, you can't possibly get behind that.
I live in California, so I continually try to ask my the people out here that let's be blunt. I've asked some of my friends out here, okay, what would you do if they genetically modified a strain of pot, which they're not doing for the record? What if they genetically modified a strain of pot to be the best pot you've ever had? And I have not gotten a consistent answer from my hippie friends out here, because some of them are like, sign me up, and some of them are like,
there's many kind of parallels you can make. Look, let's not forget that diabetes is treatable because of insulin, which has been genetically modified. I mean, there are lots of medicine. Genentech, major biotech company that uses genetic modification to make medicine. So we never hear the activists complain about the genetic modifications that create medicines that save lives. And of course, because they know that they would lose that battle with the general public. But what they do win battles on is genetically modified an apple, because it's easy to go, but why do you need to, right? I mean, what's the purpose? And it's really, of course, yes, food waste. Of course, but it's slightly more nuanced.
Well, it's because people only want to reduce food waste, or they only want to fight, vitamin A deficiency, or they only want to do the things that are hard on their terms, but they don't actually want to put the effort in to do the things.
Right, exactly.
Whenever a biotech company finds a way to fight one of these really hard to fight battles, they're like, oh, let's do this in a way that works with things that people are already doing. They're like, the biotech company is just doing this for profit. It's like, you know what? They might make a profit, but they're also doing something that's really going to help the planet.
Right. And you're certainly not going to get me complaining about anyone doing anything purely for profit. I think that's a fine reason to do it. But
if a company does something that makes a profit, as long as they're doing it that's not hurting anyone, that's by the regulations, that's safe, I don't see the problem.
Right,
and
exactly.
It's like, what, the amount of, and I've looked into all the regulations, into all of the, safety measures, into all the tests that GMOs go through. I've yet to, if I ever saw a problem with this, a safety issue with it, just from my toxicology background, I would be the first to write about it. I would be 100% willing to. And I mean, I used to work in pesticide testing, and part of that testing was making sure that there were no dioxins in it, making sure that things were safe, because I eat this food too.
Right.
And I mean, I have a congenital condition that I have to manage, that I really want to make sure that doesn't hurt my health. First and foremost. I really don't want something else in the food supply that's hurting my health. I would be the first to speak out if I thought GMOs or pesticides were also hurting them. And I've seen nothing to suggest it is. And I would absolutely speak out if I ever saw something that was hurting it. Let's talk about one of the major companies that produces a variety of tools that farmers and other people in the agriculture community use to increase yields, to improve their plants. That's Monsanto. You toured the company there, the research facility. Tell us a little bit about that whole trip. It was, first, the main reason I was heading to St. Louis was I went out there to speak at a soybean conference. And when your friend of mine, Cammie Ryan, saw that I was heading out there, she was like, would you like to come and tour Monsanto? I was like, well, of course I would. So I stayed with our friend Cammie and had a half-day tour of Monsanto. The first thing I did was sat down with their bee guy. Everyone knows him as the bee guy, Jerry Hayes. And had a nice long interview with him. And I'm working this all into an article that I'm going to be writing. But he cleared up a lot for me about the quote unquote the bee issue. And there were so many questions I had about that, because there are a lot of different species of bees, and I think people don't realize that. And I asked, so what's happening with the bees? The first thing that I learned that I didn't realize was that wild bees, or as he called them, feral bees, are pretty much all dead, at least in the U.S., or they're pretty much extinct, and it's because of the varroa mite. It's not because of pesticide spraying. It's not because of GMOs. It's because of these mites. And he held up his fist to his chest and he said, think about what it would be like if you had a pest, a parasite about the size of your fist just latched onto you. That's what it's like with these varroa mites. We didn't have a problem with this, with the bee populations until these varroa mites showed up. And then with basically all the pesticides that you find on bees, the reason that these hives these managed hives have pesticides on them is because hive managers they're spraying pesticides that are targeted at the varroa mites, not at the bees. But now because Jerry's worked in every single, sector of bee management, and research that there can be. Now he took a few months to decide if he was going to go work at Monsanto or not because of the stigma of Monsanto. But they have so many resources that he was like, this is the best chance I have at solving the varroa mite issue. What they're doing now is trying to figure out how they can save the bees without using pesticides and using bees' natural defenses against the varroa mites.
Yeah, so let's repeat that. Let's repeat that. We have Monsanto, who is actually working very hard to figure out a way to save bees without using pesticides to attack the mites. It's so contrary to the narrative that is out there.
Everything people have heard. People have heard.
Did he talk about neonics at all?
I asked him what was happening with neonics, and it's like it's at the levels that they're sprayed, they don't hurt the bees. You can spray. You could possibly there are some pesticides that hurt the bees, but it's not what we originally thought. Now, because of the fact that people thought there's a chance they were hurting them, every single the companies that make them, and I've spoken to a few different people that work at Bayer about this. They found ways to spray neonics at parts of the plant that don't that the bees don't pollinate. They spray them at the roots, not at the flowering parts of the plant. There were a couple different ways that they found to kind of spray a little bit less, spray more efficiently, but nobody is just spraying. They're not like, let us spray the bees now. And
there have been multiple highly respected field studies that consistently show that exposure to neonic-treated crops has very, very little to do with honeybee deaths and honeybee colony levels. So, this is again one of these myths out there.
And people got a little bit stupid when it came to regulation on this, and this is one of those. It's like I might be a liberal, but I also, think that people act rashly with regulation sometimes when it comes to when people see there's a problem, they try to do something good and then they do a stupid thing with regulation. And this happened in Canada, I believe in Ontario. A law came out last year. I don't know if it was a law or just I don't know the difference between a law and a regulation. This is just me not understanding Canadian government enough.
Right.
But there was a new law that came out last year that growers couldn't apply neonics until they had shown that they had an infestation. They had to do soil testing to show that they had an infestation. Yeah, basically. And one of the farmers told me that in order to do that, they had by the time they apply neonics on a regular basis, and by the time they have an infestation and they have to show that that's bad enough that they have to show it and apply neonics, they would need to apply a pesticide like Matador that does actually hurt the bees.
Right, exactly.
It was a ridiculous thing to pass. Asked, I'm like, did they apply? Sorry, go ahead.
No, go on.
It's like, and I'm like, do they ask any scientists? Do they ask any farmers when they pass this law? None, of course not. So, I really hope that.
Can you explain to people what neonics are? It's a class of pesticides, right?
It's a quote unquote natural class of pesticide that I believe is. I'm not up on this quite enough. I believe it's derived from nicotine. I'm not. I could be speaking I could be wrong on this. Please, if someone listening is better on this.
That's okay. That's okay. But it is a class of pesticides, and I just think it's important to talk about how safe neonics are considered. I mean, I just want to mention this one. There was an analysis
they are an insecticide. So, sorry, go ahead.
No. There was an analysis of, I think this is really important. There was an analysis of 1,500 field studies, okay? So sort of a meta-analysis of all these field studies. Yeah. It found that using neonics increased yields on 8 major crops, including corn. Okay, the yield increase, I'm not kidding, this is unbelievable, went from 3.6% to 7.1% by using neonics, which, again, have been shown to have zero harm to bees. So, again, you have this incredibly effective insecticide. I was calling it pesticide, but it really is an insecticide. It's not weeds. It's an insecticide.
No, pesticide for just because I get people try to correct me on this, and I'm like, I used to work in research and pesticides.
I was correcting myself.
No,
that you can.
Pesticide is the blanket term for anything that kills either
a weed killer and a bug killer.
Anything. So pesticide is a correct term for neonics.
A bug killer.
It's
a bug killer.
So and it's funny because people, whenever I call Roundup and a pesticide, people are like, it's an herbicide. I'm like,
because you're right. And the way to remember that, the way I always remember that is like weeds and bugs are pests. They're all pests, right? So you can say pesticide.
Everything. Yep.
Right, but you can't call a bug killer an herbicide, and you can't call a weed killer what's the word for a bug killer?
It's an insecticide.
Insecticide, that's it.
Yep, exactly. Insecticide, fungicide. They all, like, whatever it is, whatever you're trying to. Let's see. I think nemicide. Like if you're trying to kill a nematode, like they can get really specific.
Yes, they do, of course.
To do for work.
Of course.
But yeah, they can get really, really specific. But if you're not sure what it's trying to kill, and if I wasn't sure what I was trying to analyze, and I knew it was just used to kill a thing, I would call it a pesticide. And then I got tricked on one because we had this thing called Smart Block, and all it did. Back when I was working at AMVAC, and all it did was block the growth of potato spuds. And I started referring to it as a pesticide, and my coworkers are like, no, that's not what it does. We had one thing, I think it was called Fruit One, and it helped fruit stay on the vine or on the tree a little bit longer, so it would ripen a little bit longer. I mean, this is why conventional is better than organic, is because we have all these tools that help them grow a little bit better. I mean, it's the conventional fruit market and the willingness to use tiny amounts of very well researched chemicals allows the fruit to be allows these fruits and vegetables to grow better and ripen a bit more. And that's like in blind taste tests. In several cases, we've seen conventional produce beat organic produce. Because organic, it just means we're using older and in some cases dirtier and more and stronger and worse chemicals for farming. Because not that I need to tell you this, Julie, but we all know organic uses pesticides, and that's why it says organic and not chemical free.
That's right. That's exactly right. Well, look, I want to also just spend a few more minutes talking about any other observations you had about your Monsanto tour. Again, IWF is we're going out to St. Louis. We're doing an event with Monsanto, which I will sort of conclude this. I know, I'm so excited. I will conclude this podcast with information on that. But any other observations before we wrap this up?
Oh, let's see. The one of the neatest things I saw there is they have this machine shop. Because they have, and this is, I loved seeing this. They sometimes, because they need new pieces of equipment made so quickly to keep up with how fast they're innovating, that they have their own machine shop down there.
Amazing.
That they need to build new equipment. They have one of the biggest 3D printers on the planet. How cool is that? One of the things I love about, and I mean, I don't know how much this counts for you, but I love this because it's my brother is trans, and I know that sometimes it's hard for people. I've seen him lose jobs because he lives in a part of the world where there isn't a lot of protection based on, based on your gender, based on your orientation. They have a very inclusive hiring policy, and I do appreciate that a lot about them, especially because they're based in Missouri. So that's something that I love about them. I love that they have such a never mind inclusive, but a very they're a very, I guess, I hate to say it this way, but a very loving company for someone that people look at as this monolithic evil corporation. It kind of takes the wind out of the sails of that when liberals like to demonize them as being this evil corporation when they have, when they have such a wonderfully United Colors of Benetton staff.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. It's interesting that you say liberals. It's interesting you say liberals because it's funny. I find it's interesting these pockets. You've got the hatred of Monsanto knows no party. It's it's radical environmentalists. It's some evangelical Christians. It's really interesting how you have these sort of what you wouldn't expect partnerships between these two very different groups of people. Look, we've talked about this before. You and I have talked about this, about the anti-vax movement has as many liberal, crunchy moms as it does conservative, evangelical homeschooling moms. So it's a strange sort of. It really is, and you've got just it's interesting when I write a piece, I get beat up more by people on the right than I do by people on the left, because I often publish in more right-of-center places, but still, even on Huffington Post, people are appalled that I would, that in some cases. How
dare you write on HuffPost? I think we see the crazy in our own parties, and that's why we point it out more.
Exactly.
So it's funny that we're pointing out the crazy in our separate part, and this is why we're friends.
That's right. Well, listen, I want to just do one quick plug for the event that IWF is partnering with Monsanto and also the Global Health Center at Washington University of St. Louis. The three groups are doing an event. We're co-hosting an event on February 16th. That's Thursday from 5:30 to 8 p.m. On the university campus. That's the Danforth campus at Washington University. It's going to be held in the Clark Fox Forum in Hillman Hall. All the details are at IWF under the little tab that says events, and you can RSVP. There's a link to the Eventbrite page. We have some really amazing panelists. I knew I could not get to SciBabe because she had just come back from a trip to St. Louis, but we do often host SciBabe. She has been at other panels. We are huge fans of what the SciBabe is doing. Can you just? We're going to wrap this up, but I just want to give you an opportunity, Yvette, to talk a little bit about your book that's coming out. And apparently it was out in 2008, and I missed it. No, I'm kidding. It's coming out in 2018. Can you tell us just a tiny bit about it?
It's kind of a guide to bad science. Originally, it was called SciBabe's 10 Rules to BS Detection, and right now we're going through a bit of a reorg because I've changed editors. But it's a guide to understanding evil chemicals and wonderful chemicals and greenwashing, and what the perfect diet is. Hence, there's no perfect diet. And there's one chapter that's on quantum everything. In other words, the Deepak Chopraization of science. And understanding fake news and understanding why gurus are not the answer to everything. And telling why somebody who brags. Why somebody who brags that they're just a stay-at-home mom who taught themselves everything is probably not your go-to expert, and why detoxes are bullshit.
Right.
And here's the thing: by the end of it, I'm hoping that if you read this, you're not only going to just see a bunch of things debunked, but you're also going to be able to take that knowledge and apply it to other things. You'll be able to go, okay, I've learned how to recognize the signs of bad science. I'll be able to see a supplement and go, oh, this, all these other, these statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. It's probably bullshit.
Right.
So
well, listen, Listen, I cannot thank you enough for coming on, telling us about your really exciting trip to Monsanto. Certainly talking, about how, it's filled with wonderful people doing important research on important topics that are making the world better. I mean, really making food cheaper, more available, and again, more accessible to people. I think it's a really, really important company, Go ahead.
One last thing. One of the neatest things I saw, there was a case that had a genetically modified corn plant next to two plants that weren't genetically modified, and you could see the worms. They'd taken a few bites just to taste it, but then they'd gone over and attacked, just destroyed these two plants that weren't genetically modified. And then, that's what we're looking at for our future. We're going to see plants that aren't genetically modified, and we're going to see ones that are going to live and that aren't going to be sprayed as often. We're going to see reductions in pesticide use across the board, and this is the future is going to be much better relying on biotech and relying on the work of scientists, as opposed to people who say, I don't know much, but I think we should do things the old-fashioned way. That's never pushed us forward with technology. We need to rely on our scientists, and that doesn't just go. That goes for science. I mean, we can't just say we accept one science and not the other. That has to apply to biotech. We have to accept biotech.
That's right. Look, I am, as you know, a huge fan of your work. I really hope that the people listening
It's a mutual admiration society, really.
I hope that people will do two things. I hope that you will visit SciBabe.com. It's a great site. I love her her motto, which is a combination of real science and dirty jokes. She is, as you can tell from this podcast, she is very funny and entertaining, a fabulous writer, and really is able to distill some really complicated scientific issues into terms that people can understand. Non-scientists like me, so I myself rely a lot on Yvette and her SciBabe page. This has been another edition of the Working for Women podcast. Please check out IWF for more podcasts. And again, check out IWF.org under the events tab for information on the event coming up on February 16th in St. Louis. All are welcome, media, students, anyone can come. So check us out again at IWF, and thanks for tuning in.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, please give it a thumbs up, share it on social media, or stop by IWF.org for similar content.